Hello friends, welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Kayla, as you may or may not know. Today we are going to be talking about books. I want to share with you guys my top favorite books of the year. So far, it's about mid-December. I'll probably read a few more books by the end of the year, but these are the books that I've read so far that I think you guys might like as well. So let's hop right on into it. Alright friends, so as you know, the channel has rebranded a little bit. It's coming back as a hobby channel, which is really exciting. And a part of that just means that I'm going to start sharing more facets of my personality with you guys. And reading is a really big part of my life. Because I haven't had the time to put together an outfit video because life has been very hectic lately. I figured the least I could do was sit down on this rainy, gloomy afternoon and talk to you guys about some of my favorite reads of the year. I have 11 different series and or individual books that I want to share with you guys, so let's just dive right on in. Okay, so I'm going to start with the least favorite and then end with my favorite book of the year, which if you guys follow me on like any of my other social media platforms, you might already know what that is. But we're going to start with Love Light Farms. So this book is in a series, but it is the first of the series. It is by B.K. Borson, and it is a super cute, hallmarky, but smutty Christmas story. If you are in the market for a super cute, really cozy, just make your heart melt, big time friends to lovers book, this is the one. This book tells the story of Stella, who is a Christmas tree farm owner, and her best friend Luca. Essentially, random mishaps start happening around the farm, and these mishaps start to cause very expensive damage that are putting the farm at risk. So Stella enters a contest, but on the contest application, she lies because the social media woman who is running this contest, her name is Evelyn, who is actually the main character in another book in the series, she really loves love. So Stella lies on the application and says she owns the farm with her boyfriend, Luca, but the catch is, Luca is not in fact her boyfriend, he is her best friend. But as we go through this story, these two fake a relationship to try to win the contest, and of course, whenever there's a fake dating trope, things must go awry, and so they do, and it is just so sweet, and it's like the way these two love each other is just chef's kiss perfection. I gave this book 5 stars, baby. I really do recommend it. If you want like something that's a little steamy, but also just like really freaking pull at your heartstrings, the cutest love. It's like big time, I don't want to exist in a world that you're not in kind of love. This is the book. Okay, up next we're going to talk about a specific author, Emily Henry. If you are a reader, if you are on Book Talk, you most definitely have heard of Emily Henry. She's a really popular author. One of her best-selling books is Book Lovers, which is actually one of my favorite books. It was one of my favorite reads from last year. But this year I decided to dive into the rest of her catalog, and I picked up her other 3 books. So Happy Place came out this year. This was a new release, which is why I have the hardback version. This book is really cute. Basically, what you should know about Emily Henry is her books are pretty much guaranteed happy endings, but they're full of emotional depth and they take you on a journey. You really earn the love. You earn the happy ending. There's a lot of highs, a lot of lows, there's some interesting and strange plot points, and then there's some really cliche plot points, and you really kind of get the best of every world with Emily Henry books. I personally really love them, especially if I'm just in the mood for a good, happy time. I actually read Happy Place after I finished Iron Flame, which is the sequel in Fourth Wing, which we'll get to. The ending of Iron Flame really left me unwell. Like, the way that I have to wait an entire year to find out what happens next. After I finished it, I needed something just to give me a little bit of a pick-me-up, so I decided to read Happy Place, and oh my gosh, did it do the charm. This tells the story of a couple who has broken up, but they are still going on vacation with all of their friends, but none of their friends know that they've broken up, and this is going to be the last vacation at this house that they've stayed at for years and years and years, and so they pretend to still be in a relationship so that they don't ruin the weekend. And of course, again, fake dating. Apparently I really like a fake dating trope. A fake dating situation ensues, and they kind of realize that there's been a huge breakdown in communication between them, and that they compromised in giving up on each other to protect each other, if that makes sense. And it's just, yeah, it's the kind of book that makes you laugh, makes you cry, makes you feel all of the things. I think that's going to be a common theme with a lot of the books on this list. I really like romance books. I really like fantasy romance, and then just fantasy. Those are sort of the three main genres that you're going to see here. And most of the books that I really love are full of emotional depth, and they're full of, it really takes you through like the whole gambit of emotions. These other two books did a similar thing. People We Meet on Vacation is a friends to lovers book that made me weep. It's two people who are so desperately in love with each other, but so terrified that if they try to be in a relationship, they will ruin the very best relationship in their lives. And it is just so good. Essentially, we have Poppy and Alex, who have been best friends for years and years and years, despite their differences. And then after one fateful weekend, they have a falling out, and they don't see each other for several years after that. Then, on a whim, Poppy invites Alex on a trip with her, because that's sort of their thing. They would go on one big trip every year, and they go on a trip to try to see if they can salvage their friendship, let alone a relationship. The book is dual timeline, so we sort of hop between past trips that they've gone on and then present time in the trip that they're currently on, which I just think is such a cool structure. I really like a dual timeline. And then eventually we get to that weekend where things fall apart closer to the end, and we figure out like why it was that they hadn't seen each other in so many years, and we determine whether or not their relationship is salvageable. This book is beautiful, totally worth it. I gave it 4 stars. And then there's Beach Read. So I actually picked this book as our book club book this year. Some of you may know I have a book club with a lot of the women in my family, and so my pick for this year was Beach Read. And this book I gave 5 stars to. I love this book. It is a grumpy sunshine. It's also kind of like a one that got away kind of romance slash rivals to lovers kind of thing. So we have August and January, and they knew each other in college, but they were kind of, January kind of felt like she was always competing with August, but August was always just like enamored by her and sort of just like, why is she so happy all the time? How can she see the beauty in everything in the world? While he was sort of more cynical. So we have this story of these 2 authors. January and August are both best-selling authors, and they end up living in beach houses next to each other in this small little town. While they're living there, they end up, crossing paths and sort of striking up a friendship, and neither of them can really understand each other. January writes these really happy romance books, essentially like what Emily Henry is writing, and August writes these more cynical, realistic, heavy fiction books. So the 2 of them decide to go on a journey to teach each other about each other's genres, and they each try to write a book in each other's genre instead of their own. In doing so, they take each other on all these little adventures to sort of help them understand where they get their inspiration from. There's cults, there's small town bookstores, there's romance, there's smut, there's emotional, familial depth. There's just so much stuff going on. Really love this book. Again, I gave it 5 stars. I really do recommend. If I were to rank Emily Henry's books, I actually think it would be this order, and then put Book Lovers on top. So it would be Book Lovers, Beach Read, People We Meet on Vacation, and then Happy Place. Really love these. I definitely recommend Emily Henry if you're a romance fan. If you like a little bit of smut, but not anything like insane, like over the top crazy. But if you like emotional depth, a little bit of smut, and just a really good happy time, these are good books. Okay, so the next books that I read were actually the first books that I read of the year, and that is the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I particularly really loved Fellowship of the Rings. As you can see, I annotated the crap out of it, tabbed and annotated it. I absolutely loved these books. It was an entire experience because not only did I read it physically, but as I was reading it, I was also listening to the soundscape audiobook narrated by Phil Dragash, which is actually available for free on internetarchive.org, and it is just a masterpiece. Phil narrates all of the characters, but somehow makes 75 incredibly unique voices. It's beautifully done. There's music and there's ambiance and there's sound effects, and it's just an entire production. It was stunning. If you're going to read these books, I 10 out of 10 recommend listening and reading at the same time. I actually think that doing it that way is a really great introduction to high fantasy, because as you know, The Lord of the Rings is a high fantasy sort of quest story, and it is just so beautiful. The world building is extensive, but it's always interesting, and it's just so masterfully written, which is of course preaching to the choir. Like, everybody knows The Lord of the Rings is a masterpiece, so I guess I don't really need to belabor the point, but I really do recommend listening and reading to the Lord of the Rings books together. I think it's just the perfect way to experience this story. And of course, I gave the series 5 stars. Okay, up next, we're gonna be talking about Icebreaker. This feels so random to put Icebreaker next to the Fellowship of the Rings. Two very, very, very different genres. This is a contemporary romance. This is a sports romance. It is a college romance. It is big, huge, heart-aching love, and the debauchery of college, and the pressures of being a collegiate, high-performing, professional-bound athlete. It is just such a good book. So we have Stassi, or Anastasia, who is a collegiate figure skater. She's a pairs figure skater, and she is aiming for the Olympics. And then we have Nate, who is on the collegiate hockey team, or on the college hockey team, and he is being scouted for the NHL. So we have these two really high-performing athletes who ends up having to share a rink after someone decides to break the coolant system for the secondary rink. So the hockey players are out of their rink and they now have to share with the figure skaters. This story is, again, a lot of emotional depth. We have some familial sort of struggles when we are dealing with Nate's family, and also Stassi and her sort of, the pressure she sort of has put on herself to be sort of this perfect daughter for her parents, even though they want nothing but for her to be happy. And Nate, who lost his mom, and his dad is sort of this absent yet incredibly forceful parent who wants him to take over the family business, but Nate wants to pursue professional sports. And it is just a really, 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 really good read. It's basically all of the debauchery of college and the partying and the drinking, and very smutty, like so smutty. This was so spicy, but also it's just like really beautiful, in-depth love. Yeah, I think that a lot of the books that I read this year, kind of the you are the air I breathe, you are the gravity that keeps me grounded kind of love, but I think this is a really beautiful book. I thought it was super cute. I gave Icebreaker 4.8 out of 5 stars. Something to know about this book is it does deal with food restriction, body image, and sort of mental health issues. So if those are things that trigger you, that is something to be aware of. I do think that they're handled really well in this book. Okay, now we're sliding into fantasy romance. Up next, we have the From Blood and Ash series. Now, I would be lying to you if I didn't say I almost DNF'd From Blood and Ash, the very first book in the series. I almost DNF'd it because it is so slow to start. I wasn't really invested in the characters or really even the world that they were in until about 200 pages in, which is a lot. These books are pretty big. This is the 3rd book in the series, and this is actually my favorite book from the series. Now, I will say, as I was saying, it took me a minute to get into the very first book, but as soon as I actually got into it, oh my gosh, I was hooked. I ran through this series after I was like really invested. I really do recommend just like hanging in there. You really need to, it's one of those books you just need to like hold out and like try to push through to get to the end. I actually read a lot of reviews that said similar things, and I was really glad that I continued to read them because these are definitely some of my favorite books. I really, really loved reading this series this year. So this one is the 3rd book in the series. Like I said, it's The Crown of Gilded Bones, and this one is my favorite of the series. It is a whopping 645 pages, so it is a nice big honkin' book. I do think most of these books could be shorter, and the series is incomplete. So there are still, I believe, 3 more books to go in the series. I think it's going to be 8 total, and there are 5 out. So yeah, it's an investment, but it's so worth it. This tells the story of Poppy and Castile. Poppy is the maiden in this world, and she's supposed to be like this pure person who is going to save the world, and she can't like be in a relationship, she can't experience like romantic or physical love. She can't talk to people, she has to wear all white, and it's like this whole thing. And then we have Castile, who they call the Dark One. He is the prince of this other country. It's called Atlantia. He essentially is plotting to kidnap her and then use her as leverage to save his brother, who's being held captive. And then things go awry and he falls hopelessly in love with her, and it is just the most beautiful story. It is just so good. Castile is so morally gray, but he is also the kind of man who would literally crawl home to her. Like he almost does die in place of her. The reasons why this book particularly is my favorite, so spoilers ahead, is because of Castile's selflessness. Actually, I think that Castile is just, like I said, one of these characters. He's one of these morally gray fantasy men who will literally kill the whole world to make sure you're safe. And he's also the kind of character who would sacrifice everything to make sure that she was safe. And in this book he does. And it is just this heartbreaking, heart-aching, stunningly beautiful story. It is kind of a vampire story. I should have mentioned that earlier. In this world there are two types of people, Atlanteans, and then there are the Ascended. Essentially, the Atlanteans are kind of like real vampires. They're kind of like the Cullens, if you will, from Twilight. They're the kind of people who they voluntarily share their blood with each other to keep each other alive. And the Ascendeds are kind of like the Volturi, and they're out here just like kidnapping people and like bleeding people dry so that they can, one, turn themselves into these Ascendeds, because they're just normal humans before, and then they like drink the blood of people and then become these Ascendeds, which means essentially they have eternal life. And so the Atlanteans are trying to destroy the Ascended because, again, they're kidnapping and killing people, but the Ascendeds have tried and are continuing to try to take over the world and also eliminate the Atlanteans. And so basically the whole series is the battle, this war between these worlds, and Poppy's kind of stuck in the middle. And it's a really good story. I am really excited to see where it continues to go. Okay, moving back into contemporary romance for a minute, we have Love in Other Words. Read this book if you want to absolutely sob like a baby. This book wrecked my soul, but it was a 5-star read. It's stunning. It is so, so, so beautiful. This is a best friends to lovers story. It is a best friends to lovers after the best friends have a 10-year falling out story. It is just, if I could read this book again for the first time, I would. It is actually a book I plan to reread. I don't reread books often, but this is definitely one that I would. This tells the story of Macy and Elliot. They meet as children after Macy's mom passes away. Her dad gets a cabin and they go up there just on vacations to sort of take some time to get away from the world whenever Macy is feeling overwhelmed by life. Elliot permanently lives next door in a house with his big whole family, and so the two of them bond over their love of literature and reading, and they become best friends really quickly. But of course they only see each other on the weekends and just throughout the summers and very sporadically because they don't live in the same place. But eventually these two as teenagers decide to take the plunge and to start a relationship, until one fateful New Year's Eve night when everything falls apart. These two then spend, I believe, 11 years apart without speaking to each other, until one day Macy and Elliot run into each other in a coffee shop in LA. And it is just this heartbreaking story of figuring out what happened, why things fell apart, if they can forgive each other, if they can move on, if they can move forward, if there's any hope for them as a couple or even as friends. It is beautiful and heartbreaking, and have a box of tissues nearby. This is again the kind of love that like I will move mountains for you because that is how much I love you. You are the air I breathe. You are the song that plays in my heart. It is stunning, it's beautiful. It's a dynamic love story that will restore anyone's faith in love, according to Booklist. And I agree. Also, this is by 2 authors. It says Christina Lauren. This is actually 2 women who wrote this book together. I actually just picked up another one of their books called The Unhoneymooners, so I'm excited to dive into that one. Okay, so now we've made it to our top 3 books. They are all 3 fantasy romance, so buckle in, and you're gonna know every single one of these books. They're not groundbreaking. We've all heard of them if you have been a part of Book Talk or like the book world. Up first we have Divine Rivals. Again, in this book, literally crawls home to her. Literally. Like, literally. Okay, I want to like pull up my review for this book because I don't really want to spoil it for you guys because honestly it's just such a good book. So, Divine Rivals is a stunning love story. This novel tells the story of a grief-ridden young woman named Iris Winnow. At the outset, her brother Forrest heads off to fight in the war between 2 gods. After Forrest leaves, Iris takes to writing him letters. But having no address for him, she slips the letters underneath the wardrobe door. One day, she notices that these letters are disappearing. Unsure where they're going, she's hoping that the remnants of the magic of buried gods is helping these letters reach her brother. Then one day, she receives a response and learns that Forrest is not in fact receiving these letters, someone else is. Things take a turn when Iris faces a sudden loss, and she decides to leave her job as a writer at the Oath and become a war correspondent. She heads off to war, and not too long later, her work rival, Roman Kit, arrives at the front too. This book is heartbreakingly beautiful. It tells the story of love in the face of war. It is gut-wrenching and it is full of all-consuming love, and the ending will leave you weeping and on the edge of your seat. The sequel to this book actually comes out this month, and it is called Ruthless Vows. I cannot wait for Ruthless Vows to come out. Overall, I think this book is beautiful. I gave it 5 stars. I gave it 5 stars. It's a stunning book. It's done really, really well. Okay, number 2, A Court of Mist and Fury. Yes, I am behind the trend, but I feel like so many people started reading these books this year too, so I feel as if I'm in good company. I read the whole ACOTAR series this year. I bought the first book in Throne of Glass, so I will be getting to that in the new year, and then eventually I'll get around to Crescent City. But the ACOTAR series is beautiful. My favorite book of the series, Mist and Fury. This is the 2nd book in the series, so if you have not read this series, obviously there will be spoilers in this conversation we're about to have. But this is sort of the beginning of the love story between Rhysand and Feyre. Or I guess it's kind of the continuation. It sort of starts at the very end of A Court of Thorns and Roses, but this book is their story in a nutshell. And then obviously Wings and Ruin is the continuation of their story. But beautiful, beautiful love. We've got, again, another morally gray man. He's the kind of man who will kill the whole world to make sure she's okay. But it is just, this man would die for her, he would kill for her, he would probably, if he could, travel across space and time for her. This man is 500 years old. He's the High Lord of the Night Court, and he is like 500 years old, and he would wait 500 more years if that's how long it took for him to find her. That is how much this man loves this woman. That is love. That is big, huge love. Smutty and beautiful and deep and emotional, and there's a lot of personal growth in Feyre. She's a strong main female character. She's dealing with big capital T trauma after being held captive and tortured under the mountain. And then Rhysand sort of becomes her place to lay her head. He becomes her safe space. The end of this book too is just holy mother of pearl. I was really happy that there were already more books out in the series. ACOTAR is also an incomplete series. There are 5 books in the series out. I think we have at least 1 or 2 more left. So yeah, really love this series, cannot recommend it enough. Again, if you have not read any of these books, start with the first one, which is A Court of Thorns and Roses. This one right here is the second one. It gets a 5 stars. Okay, and now for my favorite read of the year. Surprising no one at all. Fourth Wing. This is another romantasy book. It is about dragons and a war college, and we have shadow daddies, which also, can we talk about Asriel? Asriel's book is next. That's my type. Asriel is my type. Xaden Ryerson is my type. I loved Fourth Wing. This book is stunning. It tells the story of Violet Sorrengal, who is heading off to Basquiat War College to join the Riders Quadrant, despite having trained her whole life to join the Scribes Quadrant. Her mother essentially forces her to become a dragon rider instead, and she heads off to this place. She has Elders Denholm syndrome. Did I say that right? I'm not sure if I did. I will put it up on the screen. Essentially, this is a disease that causes her to have like weakened bones, and sort of it's easier for her to break. So this is a particularly dangerous situation for her to be in. Violet's mom is a general. She is in charge of this school. She was also in charge of the execution of the families of the previous rebellion, and also the mandated service of all of their children, who now all must enter the Riders Quadrant. So when Violet is entering the Riders Quadrant, people like Xaden Ryerson, whose father was the leader of the rebellion and was executed by Violet's mother, and so the two of them absolutely are not fans of each other. They hate each other quite a bit, or so it seems. This is a love story. It is a enemies to lovers story. It is a story of determination and grit and of unbridled strength, and sort of how we shouldn't judge a book by its cover, and how even though Violet is small and seemingly quote-unquote weak, she is actually amongst the strongest in the ranks, and her brain and her intelligence kind of put her above the rest, and it is just a really beautiful story. We have sassy ass dragons, we have really, really fun side characters, great friendships, a lot of personal growth. We have a beautiful smutty relationship as well. It was just so good. And also Dane. Oh, Dane. Violet's best friend from childhood is also in this book, and it is similar to the ACOTAR story arc. If you have read ACOTAR, that will mean something to you. If you have not, it will not. But it's the idea of things change, people change, we grow. And sometimes we think we're doing things to protect people, but in fact we're actually doing things for our own selfish needs, and also we're doing things because we don't trust people in the way that we think we do. We think that we know better than them, and I think that's sort of Dane's issue throughout the book. But either way, I think this is a really beautiful, really, really wonderful story. It became my entire personality. It still is a big part of my personality. It will forever be a big part of my personality. I adore this story so much, and this is also part of an incomplete series. The sequel, Iron Flame, did come out this year. It's actually back here. I don't know if you can see it. It's right up here. The sequel was not as good, but that is often what happens in fantasy series. The second book is never quite as good as the first, but the third book is usually impeccable. So I'm really excited for whenever the third book comes out, probably in a year or so. But overall, really love this book. It is, I would say, new adult. I think some people categorize it as young adult, but there's like some pretty big smut in this book. So I would say new adult. Fantasy romance, super fucking cute. Really, really recommend. Okay guys, and those are all of my favorite reads from the year. I hope you guys enjoyed getting to just hang out and talk a little bit about books with me. I read 39 books this year so far, as I said. I'll probably read a few more by the end of the year. I'm currently reading How to Love Your Neighbor. It's like how to hate, and then hate is crossed out, and this is love your neighbor. So I'm about to tuck into that one, and I'm just really having a great time spending time in fantasy worlds and books lately, and it's just been really wonderful time. So yeah, those are all of my favorite books of the year. I am excited to hear maybe what some of yours are. If you are a reader, drop some of your favorite books down below. If you maybe aren't so much into books, maybe you have some favorite TV shows or movies you want to share, feel free to drop those down below too. Fashion videos will be coming. I do promise that is happening. It's just been crazy time right now, a crazy time, especially with the holidays, and then also with it getting dark so early, it makes it harder to film fashion content, but it's coming. Anyway, I hope you guys are all doing so well. I hope you have a wonderful holiday season, and I think that's all I have for you guys. So don't forget, it costs absolutely nothing to be kind to yourself and others, and I'll see you all on the next one. Bye!